You're listening to a Sculpted Life podcast brought to you by Pal Tiya International. Interviews with creatives around the globe.
As mentioned in podcast episode 0, some people we interviewed for A Sculpted Life didn't have access to the most amazing recording equipment, so sometimes the sound isn't exactly crystal clear, but we do hope that you get a lot from it nonetheless. Enjoy. Welcome to the second part of the podcast with Amber, Geneva, Erkiletian. We do hope you enjoyed the first part. If you haven't heard it, just go back onto our YouTube channel, which is just Pal Tiya, or onto our blog, which is www.paltiya.com/blog. We do hope you enjoy the second part.
It's the way that we use language really colors so much of what we think about, so much of how we respond, and how we integrate and interact with the world. The way that the words that were like, so when you say a place of childhood, that the impulse for making and getting your hands dirty. I don't have a sense of myself as a child, as an artist. And what I did as a child was I made childish things. What I'm doing as an adult is being okay without all of the like being okay to go into those wordless places. You know, as children, we don't develop real facility with language until we're about 6 years old. And that's the turning point when we start to interrelate language and geography and positioning and mathematics and all of that. That's when we start to really develop our facility for language and applying words to concepts.
Yeah.
What we have before then, when we talk about the childishness or the childlike world or the wonder of youth and innocence and so on, what we're actually talking about is that we didn't have words to apply to things. We just had the experience.
Yeah.
And we tried to work with it as best we can. We're still doing that as adults. But we're trying to look past our words very often to see what the original meaning is.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Of course it does. Yeah. And it's like when I do my coaching, because I still do some life coaching with people and that mindfulness, it's about kind of seeing past the conditions that they've put in place or the signposts that other people have put for them in their life, and now they can actually say, well, that's not actually mine, that was put there by someone else, or this is something that I have put up as a barrier, which actually doesn't need to be there anymore. It did because it served to protect me in some way, but now I no longer need it. So it's about kind of dismantling and again letting that vulnerability kind of come to the surface, which people are terrified of doing. Absolutely terrified.
And it makes sense. I mean, there are all of these conversations now in America about how women are treated, about how we treat animals, how we treat our environment, how we do this, and we have to look at the frame that we have been given to look through. When we frame something, usually with words, we automatically focus on it. It's like having a constant viewfinder. This is how you treat women. This is how you treat dogs. This is how you treat the world. This is how you build a house. This is the frame.
Yeah.
And when we are given that viewfinder, we don't look that way or look around it. We look through it, and our focus is what that viewfinder dictates. Here's one way. Have you ever seen any of those guilty dog videos that are on YouTube, where people like, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Then have you ever watched them with the sound off?
No.
To me, those dogs look terrified. What these dogs are saying is, the human's gone crazy again. I gotta hide in the corner. I don't know.
Yeah.
And but I'm watching it through guilty dogs, and people are saying, what did you do? And they're holding up their phones and, no. and I'm looking at the viewfinder of the title and the music and the attitude of human to dog. And then I turn the sound off and I'm just watching the dog's behavior and I'm thinking, those dogs are really scared.
That's not a happy dog.
It's not a guilty dog.
Mm.
That's a terrified dog who does not know what to do to make the situation okay again. And so I'm looking a lot at what is my viewfinder. Viewfinder for our society? What is my viewfinder for my artwork? What is my viewfinder for my conversation?
And how does that impact your work?
Right. And what I've actually done is I've always had an interest in ancient history, pre-Greek, the Gilgamesh saga, just really ancient stories, ancient mythologies. I've had this interest since I was a kid, actually. Stories of Titans and Pandora, and so since I've always had that interest, I have all of these books about ancient artifacts. And what I kind of think I'm doing, and I can't say for sure because I'm only just getting into it, I kind of think I'm going back to not only what is my viewfinder that I'll give myself focuses on, but how did we build the first viewfinder? Like, I'm trying to go way back even farther. Like, what was our structure, our references, our society? What mattered to us as a species that we would build art? And so I'm looking at art right now that is 5,500 years old, long before the Greeks, before Sumeria, before Babylon. And I'm looking at these tiny little artifacts that remain and and the symbols that they had then. Very different symbology for women and for women of power, women of strength. The Medusa, for example, is an ancient Libyan, pre-Greek ruler. That's what Medusa meant, apparently. I think I got that right, that she was the incarnate ruler in I think about 3000 BC. And the whole thing with the serpents on her head is an addition that happened after the Greeks conquered Libya and tried to denigrate this queen. So I look at these old stories and these old artifacts, and I'm trying to bring them into now. So the fact that I found a beautiful image of, it's only about 3 inches tall, and it's a lioness standing on her hind legs. And I saw this image of it, and I thought, it's 5,500 years old, and a girl loved this more than anything. Somehow that story started in my head. A girl loved this more than anything. And I resonated with it so strongly, and I noticed that resonation and that storytelling that I was coming up with, and I just thought it was so beautiful. This little 3-inch tall piece, and so I decided to build her. This standing on her hind legs. And because I need a relationship with other pieces, I took one of my other favorite ancient stories, long before the Greeks, is the story of Io, who was a white ox who was chased into northern Africa by a gadfly. It's an old myth. And oxen are an ancient imagery, ancient icon for women. You read about in Greek mythology, cow-eyed Hera. And there are these these beautiful oxen, these beautiful eyes. And so I'm playing with how we anthropomorphize, how we take ancient symbology and bring it new, how we discuss women, how we think of what is female, and how we think of what is power, what is strength. And so I've got this lioness with kind of a bodybuilder positioner looking up, and she's got a gorgeous bum. And I'm building oxen who will also be female. Their udders will show. but I've placed these oxen in sort of a sit up and beg position, like has, and they're looking up at this incredibly powerful lioness.
And what are you making these of? What?
Oh, this is all Pal Tiya.
Oh, really? Oh,
Yeah.
cool. Oh, I can't wait to see
I can bring you to the studio to show you how I'm doing the setup as well. And so it's just a huge amount of fun to have all of these different threads that I've resonated with somewhere along the line. And I'm trying to clearly say to myself, these things are about anthropomorphizing and female strength and how we look as an audience at what's in front of us. What is our focus? What's the viewfinder that we are looking through? Taking all of those and just trying to create a conversation.
I love the way that you describe your art. It's very unique, actually. It's a lovely way of looking at it. It sounds like what you're making right now is a very personal expression of something that's much deeper than you.
I don't feel, when you're really working on something and you look up and you realize that 4 hours has gone past. You've lost that sort of sense of yourself being there present, but you are really present. I love that feeling.
Oh,
it's like there's a whole universe and I don't have anything to do with it.
Yeah, it's the best. And I sit there and I write sometimes and I'll look up and it's like, 4 hours and it feels like 10 minutes.
Yeah.
And that's when you know you've hit that flow, you've hit that thing where time just seems to stop. And and then you look up and you're like, I'm really hungry. Like, I haven't peed or ate anything for hours.
Oh well, I'll go back to working.
Yeah, we'll see about the food later.
Here's that one question that you had suggested. If you had to describe your work with 3 adjectives, what would they be? And honestly, I've been working on that for ages. And what I realized is that I don't want to apply my adjectives, but I came up with three words that I would hope might be applied by others to my work.
Okay, that's a great way of looking at it, right? Because I was listening to a podcast the other day about labeling things.
Because I tend to I don't like the word overthinking. I tend to pull a lot of different things into my ideas and then try to weed through them a bit. But just in response to what you're saying about labels, that is actually part of the viewfinder that I have a real problem with, which is very much a strictly Western, what started out as descriptive has become compartmentalizing. So we have primitivism, we have naivete, we have fauve, we have impressionism. These started as descriptions, and now they have become categories. And they have a very specific viewfinder through which we look in order to see what we're being kind of told to find.
Yeah.
And so, I have some real difficulties with that, because you look at Inuit art from the 1920s and you're not going to find a category for that. You look at Japanese art from the Shinto period, the Edo period, or the Shinto mythologies, you're not going to find a good category for that. And so we have to be very careful when we label art, because what are we trying to create as a focus with those labels?
And it goes right back to you saying that the person that sees it finishes the art for themselves. So they're going to put their interpretation on it, and it's so subjective anyway. I always think that depending on what mood you're in as well, when you look at art, if I'm feeling sad and I look at a piece, I might draw out all the pain in it that the artist went through. Or if I'm feeling very joyful, then I'll see colors that maybe I didn't see before, And then if I visit it a second time, it can look completely different.
Yeah, that's one of my favorite things about art. Absolutely.
Yeah.
So the three words that I would hope could be applied to
Mm-hmm.
my work, or at least to the methods that I'm trying to use to make my work. One is humor,
Mm-hmm.
and I actually mean that in the archaic way. We talk about the humors in the body.
Mm-hmm.
It's not just something comedic, it also means temperament. You can be in a bad humor. But the archaic way of talking about it was the blood, the phlegm, the black bile, and the yellow bile. These were the the word originally derives from the term, it meant mixture or correct mixture.
I'm reading, it's so funny you should come up with that, because at the moment I'm actually reading A Pirate of Exquisite Mind about William Dampier, and they describe the humors of the time, and everything fell into one of those categories. Yeah, so I know exactly what you're talking about.
What the correct mixture of those body fluids, and this is ancient stuff, minimum 500 years old.
Mm.
Um, the mixture of these body fluids was thought to determine the physical and mental qualities of a person.
Mm.
Not just what they were going to do, but who they actually were, their quality. And so I like thinking of the word humor in that context when I look at my work. What mixture am I creating
Mm.
that affects the physical qualities? And does it affect your mental state when you look at it? So humor is one.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Another, again, with words, we can be so vague, and I often have the feeling, the second word is spiritual,
Mm-hmm.
which I have had a hard time with most of my life. I think that whenever I hear other people talking about things that are spiritual, I'm like, I don't know if I fall into that. I don't know what they mean. It's kind of vague. And it's like, well, maybe I'm not spiritual because I don't understand how everyone else is. So I was listening to this interview with Sandra Oh, the actress, and she was so unabashed about saying that her work, her creative process is spiritual. And I was like, I got to look this up. I got to see what this word really is defined as. So I looked into the etymology of it, and it comes from Middle Latin of spiritus, which means wind or breath. And
Mm.
I finally feel like I have a viewfinder to look at this word with. It's breath, because when I look at a piece of artwork that outrages me, ugh, I have a,
Yeah.
when I look at a piece of artwork that I have reverence for, ah,
Yeah.
breath. When I look at a piece that hurts, oh,
Mm.
breath. And so I have this innate physical reaction, this response that pushes the air in and out of me. Now I have some groundwork for which I can say spiritual, because there's another artist, Grayson Perry, who was talking to a kid. I love his work, and he's so funny to me, and he's so brilliant. But he was asking this 5-year-old child, "What do you think artists do?" And the boy answered, "Artists notice things." And I thought,
Mm.
now I know what I can use to define spiritual for myself, might not be for others.
Mm-hmm.
I am noticing my breath. I'm noticing my response. And that's what I'm hoping might happen with, if I can do my art well enough, that people might not just have a response, but notice it.
Mm.
So hopefully that's a term that might be applied at least to the way that I make things,
Yeah.
if the work itself. But yeah, spiritual. It's a word I've never trusted.
Yeah.
I had this kind of viewfinder to look at it through, noticing your breath. Um,
And now you can allow yourself to trust it.
it is for myself. And
Yeah.
again, that's part of that. Can I speak to myself clearly?
Yeah.
That's a way of doing so. When I'm noticing my breath, my body's trying to say something. It's speaking to me. Can I respond? Is that clarity available? And the third word, again, very complex and lots of stuff around it, words, is relational. Because there's a very new anthropology field in social science. It's actually studying our societies right now as they're happening. It tries to study the meanings and symbols and culture and identity without separating these things from day-to-day experiences. And there's even it's really coming out in social sciences in therapeutic work, because you can't break things into compartments and say, this is my issues with my mother. Okay, now I'm gonna, it's like, no, you're carrying that issue with you.
It's in your backpack.
It really is, and you can't say, oh, I felt so guilty about this thing. Okay, I'm gonna go have some ice cream. It's just like you can't break that apart. So our experience of ongoing life, we can't separate that from the meanings, the internal meanings, or from the symbols that we use to express them with. And so relational, I am very, very interested in the dynamics between objects and why we see dynamics between objects. For, taking that stone and trying to find out what's inside of it.
Yeah, goes right back to that. What do you see in your, I know you've told us what you're working on at the moment, but any kind of future that you see for yourself as an, what's your dream of accomplishing, I guess? Is there one big thing, or is it just to explore more of this side of yourself?
I've never called myself a driven person. When we talk about ambition, we talk about, oh, she has drive, she has grit. Yeah. I've never said those things because they're not true. But accomplishment is very different. When I have felt accomplishment, I have received recognition from outside that I've done something that I consider wonderful or interesting or of value. I felt accomplishment when my students just blew past me and had these huge museum shows. It's like, okay, you go. Can I help?
Yeah.
I've felt a real sense of accomplishment when my dog gained his therapy dog status, his certified therapy dog. We can go to the nursing homes and he won't kill the little old ladies or drool on them or any of that.
He'll just be petted.
Yeah. And he'll know that that's his job.
Yeah.
Put on your feet, get petted. Make sure you can't do anything else. And I've felt accomplishment in watching other people or other creatures achieve recognition and status and those sorts of things. When I've been able to really get a boot under their bums and get them going, and they did it. That is a lot of what accomplishment is for me. Again, it's the relationship, and it's not that I deserve credit. It's that I was able to give something that got that whole thing rolling, because that's going to keep going. It's going to inspire someone else. So that's accomplishment. But in terms of myself, I think it's more accurate to say, what do I find satisfying? What do I feel real regard for my attempt at communication, at building a sculpture? Because that's what I'm responsible for.
Yes.
I'm not responsible for my success, my failure, my recognition, my accomplishment. That's not what I'm interested in personally. It's not not what I go home at night with.
Yeah. Not the end outcome for you. Yeah. Yeah. Whereas
Right.
for some people it very much is.
Absolutely. And that's really valid. That's
Yeah.
really, really good. For me personally, I look at what I'm satisfied with. Did I really find that flow in the studio today? And did I set myself up so that I wouldn't get distracted by hunger or phone calls or any of that? Did I really try to make this world my own? You know, the universe is out there. I've got this world.
It's a very mindful and spiritual way of looking at it. It's a way of working. You're just in this moment creating, and you're not thinking again about the outside perspective, the labels, that you're just creating, which is what you're teaching your students to do, and whatever they do with that, that's their own story and their own narrative. You're building your own narrative. And that's just such a lovely way to look at art as well, because I think a lot of the time, you know, and I think since I did turn 40, I know lots of things happened when I turned 40, but that was another thing. It was like my definition of success completely changed. And now when I talk to people who are in their 20s and, you know, even 30s, they've got all these goals, and it's you know, let's go. And that's great, because I remember having those myself, and I needed those to keep myself going. And now it's very different, and almost to the point where I don't have any big massive goal. I mean, there's things, yes, I want for the business and so on, but it doesn't define me anymore. Whereas before I was letting things define me. So it's like you've taken your art and just said, well, I'm creating today. Today I'm going to mix the gold. I'm going to make a lovely gold. That's a very beautiful, mindful way of looking at it. You're not thinking about what you're going to do with it once you've made it. You're just going to make it.
Again, that sense of satisfaction is really essential to that kind of work as well. Like if I go to bed unsatisfied, then I know that I haven't had a good conversation with myself. I haven't made an accomplishment happen. I haven't paid the bills. I haven't swept the house, whatever. I haven't walked the dog enough, and he's jumping all over me. That is not, I haven't accomplished those things. But if I'm actually unsatisfied with my day in the studio, then that's a whole nother world. And I really need to look at that, because if I don't, then I'm not going to go into the studio the next day. You know, I need to find a way to be satisfied and tell myself, okay, I did not go in the studio at all yesterday on Sunday, but I did spend a huge amount of time looking over these questions, asking myself questions, going into the definition of spiritual and humor and relational. Do I believe it? Yes, I do. Can I talk about it? Yes, I can. You know, so that's how I found my satisfaction. I continued to think about it, to apply it, to make it have meaning, so that I can create the symbols of that.
That's what compels you to come back. And that's what I'd love to know, if you had any words for someone who is either stuck, blocked, they haven't started yet because they're scared of failure, of their own definition of failure. What would you say to those people who were holding themselves back creatively?
For one, you're being really smart. Fear is an incredibly intelligent response. It is normal, but it is necessary. You are protecting yourself. That's what fear is. Keeps you safe. So don't get mad at it. Take your time. And when you decide that you're going to open the bag and sort of poke a finger in, sometimes that's all you need to do. But when you really want to start working on something, use this process. The thing that I love about the Pal Tiya process is that 90% of your sculpture, 90%, is with tinfoil and hot glue. which means you can't get it wrong.
Yeah.
If you don't like it, you cut it off with a saw blade, or you squash it down even more, or you start fresh. You haven't lost anything.
No.
Really focus on the tinfoil as your sculpture and build it exactly. Build exactly what you want to see. Because the Pal Tiya, I mean, that's just the skin. You know, you're building all the rest of the body.
Yeah.
So you can't get it wrong. And if you're concerned about that, then you take that sense and you hand that to me, and I will put it in the trunk of the car, and I will keep it safe. When you want it back, you can ask me for it. Yeah, failure is not your job. Deciding, judging like that, it's actually not your job. Your job is to make the work and put it aside and make another.
If people want to find out more about you and your work, where would they go? Is there a website they can visit? Is there a Facebook page?
I do have a Facebook page. I'm under Amber Geneva Erkiletian. I haven't been putting my artwork up there because I have been very dissatisfied with everything that I made for most of last year. I'm very satisfied these days. The last 2 months, I'm just like, oh, I'm good.
What I wonder what made that change.
I just really started clarifying this conversation with myself.
Fantastic.
You know, what I'm interested in. Actually, what sparked it was finding the image of this lioness. Just seeing this huge response, this reverence, this appreciation, this love that I have for this image, and realizing I want to respond. Somebody created this 5,500 years ago. I want to respond. You know, this matters to me, noticing that response that I had, noticing how my breath just caught. And saying, okay, I have this huge response. I'm going to follow it. I'm going to stay with it.
Sublime. So, any other nuggets of wisdom that you want to leave us with? Anything that you feel you've not expressed that you would like to express?
Oh, boy. For one thing, especially for starting artists, when it's so easy to only hear criticism, and partly that's because a lot of people are very, very critical, and there's a difference between criticism and critique. If you notice in yourself that speaking with a certain teacher, or speaking with a certain friend, or someone that you care about, anyone, if you notice that you are consistently feeling badly about your work or your efforts, stop that conversation. You don't need to go there. Find someone else. Find a community. Stop by art galleries. When you see something interesting in the window, go in. Talk to the artist. When you see a book that you're interested in, strike up a conversation with someone who's also reading it. You know, find that community that actually increases your understanding, increases your responsiveness. We are communal creatures. Artists need other artists, but not if you're feeling shut down, not if it feels like it hurts. Notice that, notice your response, respect it. And that is really what will help remove the fear.
And if you could, if you want to, would you be able to share some of the pictures of things that you created with Pal Tiya Premium when you first found it compared to what you're creating now?
I did mention about the graveyard, right? There's a reason for that.
Okay.
But I could bring the computer into the studio now if you like, if you wanted to see kind of where I'm at. I'm just part way through. This is the studio.
Oh, wow.
It's nice and big.
It's big, yeah.
And this, if you're getting the image there, is Venice.
Wow, that's big.
Yeah. And these are the armatures for the oxen.
Oh.
don't know how well you can see those.
Yeah,
but,
no, really well. Yeah.
yeah. And it was very important that I get the lioness's height right, because I wanted her to be looking up at us as she was having this huge strength and attention from these prey animals. You know, I wanted some of that dialogue to happen. And there's the dog again.
Hello, August.
So this is one of the oxen.
Yeah.
So that's nice large horns. And this is going to be part of.
Whoa.
Yeah.
That's cool.
Yeah. So that's going to be part of another grouping, which is based on Picasso's Deconstruction of an Ox. It's a series of lithographs. Do you know it?
No.
Oh, it's beautiful. And I use it for teaching, especially when I'm telling people how to build an armature.
Okay.
It's 8 small lithographs from very detailed, very typical, like muscle, blah, blah, blah. And the progression down to an ox that is, or a bull, I'm sorry. He drew the deconstruction of a bull down to a single line with a penis, because this is Picasso.
Of course.
Right. And so I thought, wow, I love this. I'm going to build a series of sculpture that deconstruct a female ox from this very, muscular, fully formed, and break down piece by piece into a single welded armature line.
It's just amazing. Oh, I can't wait to see them.
Well, considering that the show starts on March 1st, I got a lot of work ahead of me.
You do.
Yeah. And again, the great thing about Pal Tiya, build an armature this size in 2 days, get the skin going, get the detail going. You can do it. You can do it so fast. It's really nice. Well, I had built this with all 4 legs. And then my friend came over and she said, "Oh, it's so gorgeous. Oh, I love it. Is that leg backwards?" And I had done a dog leg. And I have a video of me cutting this leg off and welding a new one on, because I just wanted to see if I could. And it took me forever. My God, it was awful. This stuff is so strong.
Yeah.
It's nice because I've worked in bronze, large-scale bronze casting, large-scale aluminum. I've worked in fiberglass. I've worked in wood. I worked in a foundry professionally for a few years. If I had tried that with any other medium, I would have had an incredible expense, might not have been possible, might never have looked right. But stuff, I can just, break out the grinder. Let's do it.
Let's saw off one of these legs.
Yeah. And I videoed it so that I could show you, because, I was thinking of putting it to music, like a little da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da.
Yeah. Or a little
But it's a lot of fun. It's a really.
I say this on every episode, but I'll say it again. It is our passion and our dream and our mission to make art so accessible that anyone can just pick this up and do it.
Absolutely.
And from those Pal Tiya parties where you were just going, I don't know what I'm doing, to that, I mean, that's just insane. And you've only had it for less than a year, right? Yeah. That's incredible. So for us to see people growing bigger when they've only ever made small things, and then suddenly they can now go bigger because they don't need that kiln, it's just beautiful to watch.
I know you don't need a $50,000 studio to cast in large exterior.
Yeah,
like I said, I worked in bronze. I know what it costs. And there's so little mess. I had a few people over to try it out, and and at the end of it, I had 6 students, and all friends of mine. I just said, pay me for the materials, and let's see what we can do with this. And at the end of that, 6 people, they all built their mushroom houses. And I had half a bag of trash, like half of a kitchen bag of trash,
Yeah.
and a shopping bag of recycling. It's like, you can't do that with anything else. There's like no waste. It's so cool.
When you start creating in it, it's just your mind just goes into a million different places because there's so much you can do with it, which is very, very exciting. And, you know, I think it has its place in the art world. One day I hope to be in the same line as, oh, you can use bronze, clay, marble, Pal Tiya Premium, you know, that'd be lovely.
There's this horrible disparity. You've got 20 painters for every one sculptor. And it's because you just can't access the mediums.
Yeah.
You know, to do well in bronze takes a 5-year tutorial.
Yes.
You know, you need to be like an apprentice and you need to have the facility. It's so expensive. And I really think that this medium, Pal Tiya Premium, can actually equalize that ratio. I mean, every kid has picked a lump of clay and made something for mom, you know, every kid.
Yeah.
This is a lump of clay, but now it's all grown up.
Lovely way of looking at it. But, yeah, one day, who knows? We'll just keep
Oh,
trying.
I think it's going to happen really fast.
Oh, I hope so.
I hold an art class, and I've got 12 women and 1 man. That's the typical ratio.
Yeah.
Women make art. Women take art classes. And especially with the change in how women are being viewed and that whole conversation, the Me Too thing, all of that, I really think that your product is going to make an explosion of female artists, like a huge explosion. And there's going to have to really be a shift in the conversation about art and what it means and all of these things that we've been talking about, as well as a shift in the culture that said it. And that's going to be fascinating. You know, the thing that I was saying about the difference between accomplishing and satisfaction, that was not actually something that I had thought about before. So I hope that has a relevance because I think it might be important. I've been doing a lot of work on these kinds of questions and thinking. So it's one of the things we're trying to do. My Pal Tiya friends who are building in their own way, and one project in Pal Tiya and others in plaster and so on. So we have this big group show at a new gallery right in downtown Montpellier. And we've been working together on ideas about art for a year now. And you really need specific questions, you know, like that will draw someone out. But you also need to have someone who's created that, who's worked at creating that conversation with themselves, like speaking really to yourself. So yeah, it's there's so much to go through. There is one thing also just to put in about people who are new to Pal Tiya who are afraid of it. Something that Gemma always told me: the materials are not precious.
Yes.
They are not precious. Oh. Remember that. And it's not that you're going to make something precious. It's that what's precious is different than what you're doing. Just the material is not precious. Use it. It's what it's for. Well, I'm going to have to order another half-ton pretty soon. I think I only have 8 bags left. Oh, wow. I'm going to be needing to order more. If Kim is at all interested, I'd love to hear what she thinks of it, because I do have this fantasy that, you know, say everything goes kerflooey here where I live and all of that, then I am going to move to New Zealand and apply for a job. Thank you so much for having me on. I really appreciate it.
No, it was really fun, and I'm so looking forward to meeting you. Thanks so much for taking the time to listen to our podcast today. Hey, I have a favor to ask, and it won't take very long. Would you be so kind as to go and leave a review on iTunes? This helps more people find out about our podcast, and as we grow and evolve, we love more listeners like you. Thanks so much. Until the next time.
If you want to know more about Pal Tiya and our amazing product, Pal Tiya Premium, then visit www.paltiya.com and join our international fan base.